Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? Like no matter how hard you try, nobody truly sees you. Let me ask you something even more uncomfortable. What if the reason they don't respect you has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you? That stings, doesn't it? Because it's easier to blame the world. It's easier to say they're jealous, they're blind, they're insecure. But respect is not something you beg for. It's not something you demand. And it's definitely not something you post about. Respect is earned in silence long before it's recognized in public. Here's the truth most people won't tell you: people don't ignore you because you're not good enough. They ignore you because you haven't decided who you are yet. When you're unsure, the world is unsure. When you hesitate, the world hesitates. When you tolerate disrespect, you train people how to treat you. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you tolerate. Think about that. If someone constantly interrupts you and you say nothing, you've just given permission. If someone cancels on you again and again and you smile and say, "It's okay," you've just lowered your value in their mind. Not because you're weak, because you didn't set a boundary. Respect begins the moment you decide that your time, your energy, and your standards are not negotiable. And here's where it gets powerful: the people you admire, the ones who walk into a room and don't need to speak loudly to command attention. They're not louder. They're not more aggressive. They're not trying to prove anything. They are certain. Certainty is magnetic. When you know who you are, when you know what you stand for, when you are willing to walk away from anything that violates your standards, people feel it. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to impress. You don't need to chase. Because the moment you stop chasing validation, you start attracting respect. And that shift, that internal shift, is where everything changes. So before you try to make them respect you, ask yourself a harder question. Do you respect yourself enough to stop accepting less than you deserve? Let me tell you a story. There was a young professional who worked harder than everyone else in the room. He arrived early. He stayed late. He said yes to every request. If someone needed help, he was there. If a deadline was tight, he sacrificed his weekends. He believed that effort alone would earn him respect. But something strange kept happening. When promotions came, his name wasn't mentioned. When important meetings happened, he wasn't invited. When decisions were made, his opinion wasn't asked. And quietly, resentment started to grow. He told himself, "They don't see my value." But the truth was harder than that. They saw his value. They just didn't feel his boundaries. You see, being hardworking is admirable. Being helpful is noble. But when you constantly say yes without conditions, people stop seeing it as generosity and start seeing it as availability. And availability without boundaries does not create respect. It creates convenience. There's a powerful difference between being kind and being a pushover, between being collaborative and being compliant, between being supportive and being self-sacrificing. Respect grows when people know there is a line they cannot cross. If you never say no, your yes means nothing. Think about the people you deeply respect in your life. Do they say yes to everything? No, they are selective. They protect their time. They protect their energy. They protect their focus. And when they say yes, it carries weight. Here's the psychological truth: humans value what is scarce. If your time is always available, it feels cheap. If your attention is always accessible, it feels ordinary. But when you guard it with intention, it becomes valuable. This is not about arrogance. It's not about ego. It's about self-respect. Self-respect is not loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue endlessly. It simply states calmly, "This is acceptable. This is not," and then it acts accordingly. The young professional eventually made a change. He stopped volunteering for everything. He started asking, "What will this responsibility replace?" He began declining tasks that didn't align with his growth. He stopped apologizing for protecting his time. Something shifted. At first, people were surprised. Some were even uncomfortable. But slowly, something else happened. They began to ask for his opinion. They began to involve him in decisions. They began to treat his time as valuable, not because he worked more, but because he finally decided he was worth more. Now, here's where most people get it wrong. They think respect comes from dominance, from speaking louder, from proving everyone wrong, from showing power. But real respect doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from alignment. Alignment between what you say and what you do. If you say you value health but constantly neglect your body, people notice. If you say you demand honesty but tolerate lies, people notice. If you say your time is important but waste hours scrolling and complaining, people notice. You may think they don't see it. They do. Respect begins internally long before it shows externally. The way you treat yourself is the blueprint others follow. If you constantly criticize yourself, you subtly communicate insecurity. If you constantly seek approval, you signal doubt. And doubt invites dismissal. Confidence is not about thinking you're better than anyone. It's about knowing you don't need to compete with anyone. There's a powerful story about a leader who rarely raised his voice. In meetings, when others argued, he would listen. When tension rose, he stayed calm. When chaos appeared, he became steady. At first, people mistook his calmness for weakness. Until they realized something critical, he never reacted emotionally. He responded strategically, and when he spoke, the room went silent. Why? Because he didn't speak to impress. He spoke with intention. The strongest person in the room is often the calmest. Not because they lack emotion, but because they control it. Emotional control is one of the highest forms of power. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't bite, you win. When someone underestimates you and you don't rush to prove yourself, you win. When someone doubts you and you quietly continue building, you win. Because desperation repels respect. Certainty attracts it. You don't need to convince people of your value. You need to embody it. And embodiment requires discipline. Discipline in your words. Discipline in your reactions. Discipline in your standards. If you say you won't tolerate gossip, don't participate in it. If you say you want growth, stop entertaining distractions. If you say you deserve better, stop accepting less. People test boundaries consciously or unconsciously. Not because they're evil, but because humans seek limits. When they discover that your standards are flexible, they adjust their behavior downward. When they discover your standards are firm, they rise, or they leave. Both outcomes are victories, because respect is not about keeping everyone around you comfortable. It's about keeping your values intact. Let's go deeper. Most people think they're being disrespected when in reality, they're being evaluated. Every interaction is an evaluation. When you walk into a room, people subconsciously ask, can I trust this person? Do they stand for something? Are they consistent? Do they believe in themselves? And you answer those questions long before you introduce yourself. Through your posture, through your tone, through your patience, through your restraint. Respect is built in micro moments. The way you handle delays, the way you respond to criticism, the way you react when things don't go your way. Weak energy reacts instantly. Strong energy responds intentionally. There's a difference. Imagine two people facing public criticism. The first person defends aggressively, interrupts, blames, explains endlessly, tries to control the narrative. The second person listens, pauses, acknowledges what's valid, ignores what's noise, speaks briefly, moves forward. Who feels stronger, the one who needs to win the argument or the one who doesn't need the argument at all? Power doesn't rush. Power doesn't panic. Power doesn't beg to be understood. When you feel the urge to over-explain yourself, pause. When you feel the urge to prove your worth, pause. When you feel the urge to chase someone who's pulling away, pause. Because chasing is loud, and respect grows in silence. This doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It means you become grounded. Grounded in who you are. Grounded in what you value. Grounded in what you will and will not accept. The truth is, people don't respect perfection. They respect clarity. Clarity about your mission. Clarity about your priorities. Clarity about your boundaries. When you are unclear, you negotiate your own worth. When you are clear, others adjust. And here's the advanced part most people ignore. You must be willing to lose people. If you're terrified of losing someone, you hand them power over you. If you're afraid of being alone, you will accept behavior that shrinks you. But when you reach a point where you'd rather walk alone than walk disrespected, everything changes. Your voice becomes steadier. Your decisions become sharper. Your presence becomes stronger. Because now you're not operating from fear. You're operating from self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of every lasting form of respect you will ever receive. There's another level to this. Respect is not built when everything is going well. Respect is built when things go wrong. Anyone can look confident when they're winning. Anyone can speak boldly when they're supported. Anyone can act strong when the environment is comfortable. But what happens when you fail publicly? What happens when you're rejected? What happens when someone questions your ability? That is where your true identity is revealed. Most people crumble under pressure because their confidence was built on approval. And approval is unstable. It disappears the moment you disappoint someone. If your identity depends on applause, you will fear criticism. If your identity depends on validation, you will fear disagreement. And fear will make you compromise your standards. But when your identity is rooted in values, not opinions, you become unshackable. Think about this carefully. When someone criticizes you unfairly and you remain composed, you send a powerful signal. Your opinion does not control my emotional state. That is strength. When someone rejects you and you don't chase them for explanation, you communicate, I know my value does not decrease because you failed to see it. That is dignity. When someone underestimates you and you quietly improve instead of arguing, you demonstrate, my results will speak louder than my defense. That is leadership. The advanced secret to earning respect is emotional independence. Emotional independence means you are not controlled by praise or insult. You appreciate recognition, but you do not rely on it. You listen to feedback, but you are not shattered by it. Because when you are emotionally reactive, people feel they can move you. And if they can move you easily, they don't respect you deeply. Stability commands trust. Imagine standing next to someone in a storm. The wind is loud. The rain is heavy. Everyone is panicking. But one person stands steady, breathing slowly, thinking clearly, acting deliberately. You naturally look to that person, not because they shout instructions, but because their calm becomes an anchor. That is who you must become. Not dramatic, not defensive, not desperate, anchored. Anchored in your standards, anchored in your discipline, anchored in your long-term vision. Because when you stop reacting to every small wave, people start seeing you as something bigger than the moment. And that's when respect stops being requested and starts being given. Now let's confront something uncomfortable. Sometimes the reason people don't respect you is because you don't respect your own future. You say you want growth, but you stay in environments that shrink you. You say you want excellence, but you surround yourself with mediocrity. You say you want discipline, but you negotiate with your excuses. And people see that. They may not say it out loud, but they observe your patterns. If you constantly break promises to yourself, why would anyone believe your promises to them? Self-trust is the foundation of outer trust. Every time you say, I'll start tomorrow, And you chip away at your own credibility. Every time you say, "This is the last time," and repeat the behavior, you weaken your own authority. Respect begins when your word becomes law in your own life. If you decide to wake up at a certain time, you wake up. If you decide to finish a task, you finish it. If you decide to walk away from something unhealthy, you walk away. No negotiation. Discipline is self-respect in action. And here's the deeper truth people feel discipline. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to advertise it. But when someone is consistent, focused, and aligned, it radiates. There's something powerful about a person who doesn't need motivation to do what must be done. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline stays. When you become disciplined, you stop being unpredictable, and unpredictability erodes respect. Think about a leader who changes direction every week. One day they're passionate. The next day they're doubtful. One week they demand excellence. The next week they tolerate laziness. Would you trust them? Consistency builds credibility, and credibility builds respect. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. Show up the same way on good days and bad days. Maintain your standards when it's convenient and when it's uncomfortable. Keep your promises when no one is watching. That last part is critical, because true character is revealed in private. If you only act with integrity when there's an audience, it's performance. If you act with integrity when it costs you something, it's identity. And identity is what people respect. So ask yourself, are you living in a way that your future self would admire? Are you building habits that demand respect? Are you aligning your actions with your words? Because when your life becomes proof of your standards, you won't need to convince anyone of your worth. They'll see it, and they'll adjust. Let's talk about silence, not weakness, not avoidance. Strategic silence. Most people talk too much when they feel insecure. They overshare their plans. They explain every move. They announce every goal before they've earned it. And when those plans fall apart, so does their credibility. There is power in letting your actions speak before your words do. When you constantly broadcast your intentions, you invite opinions. You invite doubt. You invite unnecessary noise. And noise distracts you from execution. But when you move quietly, something different happens. You build in private. You improve in private. You struggle in private. And then one day you arrive in public. People are surprised. They say, "When did this happen?" They say, "I didn't even know you were working on this." Exactly. Respect grows when results appear without warning. There's a psychological principle at play here. Familiarity reduces perceived value. When people see every step of your journey, every complaint, every minor win, every emotional fluctuation, they become desensitized. But when they only see the outcome, the growth feels dramatic. Silence protects momentum. It keeps you focused. It shields you from unnecessary validation. It forces you to rely on discipline instead of applause. And here's something even more advanced: when you speak less, your words carry more weight. If you are always talking, people learn to filter you out. But if you are selective, if you speak with intention, if you contribute only when it matters, people lean in. Scarcity increases value. Think about the person in a meeting who doesn't interrupt, doesn't compete for attention, doesn't dominate the room. They listen carefully, they observe, they analyze. Then, when they finally speak, it's precise, clear, impactful. The room shifts. That is controlled presence. You don't need to prove intelligence by constant commentary. You prove intelligence by clarity and timing. And silence also reveals something powerful: emotional control. When someone tries to provoke you and you refuse to react, you display strength. When someone gossips and you don't participate, you display maturity. When someone underestimates you and you don't defend yourself immediately, you display confidence. Because you know something they don't. You know that respect is not built through noise. It's built through restraint. Talk less, execute more. Reveal results. And watch how quickly the same people who ignored you start paying attention. Here's where most people fail to grasp the truth about respect. They think it's earned by impressing others, by showing achievements, by boasting about connections, by decorating their life for the world to admire. But external accomplishments alone don't create respect. They create envy, admiration, or curiosity, but not lasting respect. Respect is earned through integrity under pressure, through consistency when no one is watching, through courage when it matters most. Think of the moments that truly test a person: when deadlines are crushing and everyone is panicking. Do they stay composed? When criticism cuts deep and the room is hostile, do they maintain dignity? When resources are scarce and temptation is high, do they stay aligned with their values? These are the invisible tests. And the way you respond to them signals everything about your character. Let me tell you a story. There was a team leader who was consistently underestimated. People assumed he would fold under pressure, that he would bend his principles for convenience, that he would compromise for acceptance. And time after time he didn't. He delivered results without complaint. He upheld his standards without apology. He made hard decisions without seeking approval. At first people were irritated. They whispered doubts. They tried to push boundaries. But slowly something shifted. The same people who doubted him began to defer. They began to include him in decisions. They started seeking his opinion. They began treating his time, energy, and perspective as valuable. Why? Because he proved, through action, not words, that he had boundaries, that he had discipline, that he had self-respect. And here's the critical lesson: you don't need to chase respect. You need to radiate a life that is aligned with your values. You need to cultivate presence. You need to demonstrate calm under pressure. You need to embody reliability and accountability. People feel it. And once they feel it, respect is automatic. This is the advanced truth most people misspect as contagious. It spreads from how you conduct yourself, from the energy you bring, from the standards you uphold. You don't demand it. You don't negotiate for it. You don't justify it. You become it. And when you become it consistently, you no longer have to ask for it. It appears naturally, because people always follow what they see, not what they're told, not what they're promised, but what is consistently demonstrated over time. Here's the next truth most people ignore. Respect is not just about how you act toward others. It's also about who you allow in your life. The people you surround yourself with either elevate you or erode your value. They either reinforce your standards or normalize disrespect. Think about it. If you tolerate constant excuses from friends, colleagues, or partners, you are sending an invisible message. It's okay to disrespect me. If you let people manipulate guilt or pressure you without consequences, you are teaching them how to treat you. If you bend, apologize, or shrink for approval, you are quietly lowering your own worth. This is subtle but powerful. Most people chase external recognition while ignoring the internal ecosystem that determines their respect. They wonder why their ideas aren't valued, why their presence is overlooked, why their time is disregarded, and yet they haven't curated their environment to reinforce their standards. There's a story about a professional who constantly complained about colleagues undermining him. Meetings were ignored, opinions dismissed, contributions minimized. Then he realized something. It wasn't about proving himself to them. It was about the company culture he was tolerating, the environment he was nurturing around himself. He started making difficult choices. He stopped allowing people to interrupt or dominate conversations. He stopped staying late to cover for those who never reciprocated. He distanced himself from toxic patterns. And the result, suddenly, he was invited to the table. Suddenly, his opinions mattered. Suddenly, his time and energy were respected. Why? Because he stopped tolerating what didn't serve him. Because he demonstrated that his standards were non-negotiable. Because he refused to anchor his worth to those who wouldn't rise to it. This is the advanced principle most people miss. Respect isn't given. It's filtered. Only people who align with your values, only those who recognize your boundaries, only those who operate at your level of integrity, they stay. The rest, let them go. Because trying to force respect from people who don't see your value only diminishes your energy and weakens your presence. Your role is not to convince, it is to embody, to act. To enforce your standards silently but consistently. And when you do, the right people naturally gravitate toward you. The wrong people naturally distance themselves. And in that space, your influence grows, your authority strengthens. And the respect you earn is no longer conditional, it is inevitable. Because you are no longer negotiating for it, you are commanding it through the life you live. Now let's bring it all together. Respect is not an event. It's a process, a lifestyle, a reflection of your identity, your boundaries, and your discipline. It begins internally long before anyone acknowledges it externally. It begins with the quiet decisions you make every day, the way you manage your time, the standards you enforce, the integrity you uphold, the people you allow in your life. It's built in micro moments. How you respond to tension, criticism, or failure. How you speak when it matters, and how you remain silent when speaking is unnecessary. How you act when no one is watching, because character is revealed in private, not on display. Let me be clear, this is not about perfection. This is about consistency, about alignment. About creating a life that embodies your worth without apology. Because the moment you live in alignment with your values, something extraordinary happens. People notice. Not because you shouted for recognition, not because you proved yourself at every turn, but because your energy, your presence, your actions communicate something undeniable. You are a person who will not be diminished. And when that energy radiates, respect is automatic. It does not need to be asked for. It cannot be manipulated. It simply arrives because people respond to certainty, discipline, and self-respect. Here's the ultimate lesson: you cannot control others. You cannot force recognition, admiration, or respect. What you can control is how you show up, how you carry yourself, how you define your boundaries and protect your energy. So stop asking for validation, stop tolerating disrespect, stop negotiating your worth, stop chasing approval from those who fail to see it. Instead, start living in a way that demands it. Show up with discipline, act with integrity, protect your standards, move quietly, deliver results, guard your time, surround yourself with alignment, anchor yourself in certainty. Respond with calm when chaos arises, and refuse to compromise when it costs your identity. Because respect is not given to the loudest, the flashiest, or the most aggressive. Respect is given to the steadfast, the consistent, the disciplined, the unshakable. And when you embody that fully, there is nothing left to prove. The world will recognize it. People will feel it. And finally, they will give you what you always deserved, not because you asked, but because you became undeniable. You don't just earn respect, you become it.